My son hadn't returned my calls in nearly 2 weeks. At first, I told myself he was just busy with work. Connor had always been the type to get absorbed in his projects, sometimes forgetting to check his phone for days. But 2 weeks felt different. It felt wrong. I'm Margaret, and I raised Connor by myself after his father passed when he was only 7. We'd always been close, the kind of close where silence doesn't need filling, where a look across the room says everything. So when that silence stretched into days, then a week, then another, something inside me began to twist. I tried his wife, Sophia. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Oh, Margaret, Connor's been swamped at the firm. You know how it is during tax season. He barely has time to breathe." It was May. Tax season had ended a month ago. I pushed down the unease. "Could you have him call me when he gets a chance, just to hear his voice?" "Of course, I'll remind him tonight." But he never called. 3 days later, I tried again. This time, Sophia sounded irritated. "Margaret, I already told you he's working late every night. He comes home exhausted. I'm sure he'll call you this weekend." The weekend came and went. Still nothing. I'm not the type of mother who shows up unannounced. I respect boundaries, give space. But on day 16, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly, terribly wrong. It was a Tuesday morning when I made the decision. I'd drive to their house in Oakville, just over an hour from my place in Burlington. I'd surprise them with Connor's favorite lemon squares, the ones I used to make for his birthday when he was little. The drive felt longer than usual. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, and I found myself glancing at my phone every few minutes, hoping for a call that never came. Their house was a beautiful 2-story brick colonial with white shutters and a wraparound porch. Connor had been so proud when they bought it 3 years ago, right after he made partner at his accounting firm. Sophia had insisted on the house she'd grown up in a similar home in Mississauga, and she wanted that same picture-perfect life. I pulled into the driveway at 11 in the morning. Sophia's silver Lexus was parked there, but Connor's black Audi was nowhere in sight. Maybe he really was at work. Maybe I was being a paranoid old woman. I grabbed the container of lemon squares and walked to the front door. I knocked 3 times. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Nothing. I knew Sophia was home. Her car was right there. I pressed the doorbell, heard the chime echo inside. Still nothing. That's when I remembered, years ago when they first bought the house, Connor had given me a spare key, just in case, Mom. You never know when we might need you. I'd tucked it into a small pocket in my purse and honestly forgotten about it until that very moment. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out my keychain and found the silver key with a small blue tag that read Connor and Sophia. I shouldn't do this, I thought. This is an invasion of privacy. But the gnawing feeling in my gut wouldn't let me walk away. I slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. The door opened with a soft creak. "Hello? Sophia? Connor?" My voice echoed in the empty foyer. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of an empty home, but the kind of silence that makes your skin prickle. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. Everything looked normal at first glance. The living room was pristine, cream-colored sofa, glass coffee table without a single smudge, fresh flowers in a vase on the mantel. Sophia had always been meticulous about keeping things perfect. "A place for everything and everything in its place," she used to say. I moved through the living room into the dining area. The table was set with 4 placemats, as if they'd been expecting guests who never arrived. A thin layer of dust covered the surface. Strange. Sophia would never let dust accumulate. "Sophia?" I called again, louder this time. Then I heard it. A faint sound, barely audible. A rhythmic tapping, like someone knocking on wood, but weak, distant. It seemed to come from above. I froze, listening. There it was again. Tap, 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 tap. The sound was coming from upstairs. My heart began to race. I climbed the staircase, each step making the old wood creak beneath my feet. The tapping grew slightly louder. I reached the second-floor landing and stopped. 3 doors. The master bedroom straight ahead, a bathroom to my left, and a closed door to my right, the door to the study. The tapping was coming from above the study. The attic. Connor and Sophia had mentioned converting the attic into a home office space, but I'd never seen it completed. I opened the study door and stepped inside. The room was neat bookshelves lined with legal texts and accounting manuals, a mahogany desk with a computer, everything in order. But there, in the corner, I saw it. A pull-down attic ladder, the kind that folds up into the ceiling, and it was secured with a heavy-duty padlock on the outside. Why would anyone lock an attic from the outside? The tapping came again, more frantic now. Tap, 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 tap. Someone was up there. Hello? I called toward the ceiling. Is someone there? The tapping stopped. Then, a voice. Weak, hoarse, barely recognizable. Mom? My blood turned to ice. Connor! I screamed his name. Connor, is that you? Mom, please, help me. I grabbed the padlock, yanked at it uselessly. It was solid, industrial grade. I needed something to break it. I ran back downstairs, my mind racing. The garage. There had to be tools in the garage. I burst through the door, connecting the kitchen to the garage, and frantically searched. Gardening tools, paint cans, a lawnmower. Then I sawed a heavy bolt cutter hanging on the wall. I grabbed it and ran back upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. My hands shook as I positioned the bolt cutter around the padlock's shackle. I squeezed with all my strength. Nothing. I tried again, putting my full body weight into it. The metal groaned, and then snap! The padlock fell to the floor with a clatter. I pulled down the attic ladder, and a wave of stale, fetid air hit me. The smell was nauseating, sweat, urine, something rotten. I gagged but forced myself to climb up. The attic was dim, lit only by a small dormer window covered with a blackout curtain. As my eyes adjusted, I saw him. Connor. My son was lying on a bare mattress in the corner, his wrists zip-tied to a metal pipe. He was emaciated, his cheeks hollow, his lips cracked and bleeding. His clothes, the same button-down shirt and slacks I remembered from the last time I'd seen him, hung loosely on his frame. There was a bucket in the corner that explained the smell. An empty water bottle lay on its side near his feet. "Connor!" I scrambled toward him, pulling out my phone with shaking hands. I dialed 911 as I tried to untie him. 911. What's your emergency? My son. I found my son locked in an attic. He's been held here. He needs an ambulance. Please, hurry. I gave them the address, barely able to speak through my sobs. Mom, Connor whispered, his voice cracking. Water. I ran back down to the kitchen, filled a glass, and brought it back up. I held it to his lips, and he drank in desperate gulps. Slowly, sweetheart, slowly. His eyes met mine, and I saw something there I'd never seen before, pure terror. Where's Sophia? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. She did this. His voice was barely a whisper. She's been keeping me here. Why? Connor, why would she? The money. Mom, she wanted. She wanted me to sign papers, transfer everything to her. The house, my accounts, my life insurance. When I refused, she locked me up here, said she'd let me starve until I agreed. My mind reeled. Sophia. Sweet, perfect Sophia with her bright smile and her perfect house. The woman who'd stood beside my son at their wedding 5 years ago, promising to love and cherish him. That Sophia had done this? How long? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. 3 weeks, almost 4. I lost count after the first week. 3 weeks. He'd been up here, suffering, while I was at home worrying, while Sophia was answering my calls with lies. The sound of sirens grew louder outside. Within minutes, paramedics were rushing up the stairs. They carefully cut the zip ties binding Connor's wrists, checked his vital signs, started an IV. I stood back, watching them work, feeling utterly helpless. Ma'am, we need to get him to the hospital immediately, one of the paramedics said. He's severely dehydrated and malnourished, possible organ damage. 2 police officers appeared in the attic doorway. Mrs. Patterson. Margaret Patterson. This is my son, Connor. Can you tell us what happened here? I explained everything, the unanswered calls, the spare key, finding Connor locked in the attic. As I spoke, I watched them take photographs. Examine the padlock, the zip ties, the bucket in the corner. "Where's the wife?" one officer asked. "I don't know. She wasn't here when I arrived." They radioed for backup, began searching the house. I followed the paramedics as they carried Connor down the stairs on a stretcher. His hand reached out and grabbed mine. "Don't leave me," he whispered. "Never. I'm right here." They loaded him into the ambulance, and I climbed in beside him. As we pulled away, I saw police cars surrounding the house, officers entering with their weapons drawn. At the hospital, doctors rushed Connor into intensive care. I sat in a small waiting room with uncomfortable plastic chairs and fluorescent lights that hummed too loudly. A nurse brought me terrible coffee in a styrofoam cup. I couldn't drink it. I couldn't do anything but sit there, replaying everything in my mind. How had I not known? How had I not seen the signs? 2 hours later, a doctor emerged. "Mrs. Patterson?" I jumped to my feet. "How is he?" "Your son is stable. He's severely dehydrated and malnourished. He's lost nearly 25 pounds. We're treating him for acute kidney stress and monitoring his heart. But he's going to survive. You found him just in time. Another few days." The doctor didn't need to finish that sentence. I covered my mouth, tears streaming down my face. "Can I see him?" "He's sleeping now, but yes. Follow me." Connor looked so small in that hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to various machines. I pulled a chair close and took his hand. His fingers were cold and thin, but they wrapped around mine with surprising strength. A police detective arrived an hour later. Detective Linda Harding was a woman in her late 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mrs. Patterson, I need to ask you some questions about your daughter-in-law." We moved to a small consultation room, and I told her everything I knew about Sophia. They'd met 6 years ago through mutual friends. Sophia worked in pharmaceutical sales, made good money. She was charming, ambitious, always dressed impeccably. Connor had been smitten from their first date. "Did you notice anything unusual about their relationship?" Detective Harding asked. I thought back. Sophia was very controlling. She made all the decisions about the house, their social life. Connor seemed happy to let her take the lead. He'd always been more laid back, focused on his career. I thought it was just their dynamic. "Did you know about their finances?" "Not really. Connor mentioned once that they kept separate accounts, even after marriage. Sophia's idea, apparently." The detective wrote something down. "We found documents in the house. It appears Sophia had Connor sign a new life insurance policy about 6 months ago, $2 million, with her as the sole beneficiary. We also found draft documents transferring his assets, his partnership in the firm, the house, investment accounts, all to her name." "But he refused to sign them?" "According to your son, yes. That's when she locked him in the attic. She'd been feeding him just enough to keep him alive, bringing him water once a day, telling him that when he was ready to cooperate, she'd let him out." I felt sick. "Where is she now?" "We're searching for her. Her car was found abandoned at Toronto Pearson Airport. We believe she may have fled the country, but we've issued an alert. We'll find her." Over the next few days, the full horror of what had happened came to light. Connor, once he was strong enough to speak, told me everything. 6 months ago, Sophia had come home with papers from a lawyer. She told Connor she wanted to simplify their finances and suggested he transfer everything into her name for tax purposes. Connor, despite being an accountant, knew this made no sense. When he questioned her, she became angry, accusatory, said he didn't trust her, didn't love her enough. He refused to sign. That's when things escalated. Sophia began isolating him, canceling plans with friends, discouraging him from calling me. She started working from home more often, monitoring his movements. Connor didn't see it as abuse at the time. He thought she was just stressed about work. Then, one evening in April, she'd asked him to check something in the attic, said she heard a noise, thought maybe there were raccoons. Connor climbed up the ladder, and that's when she struck him from behind with something heavy. He woke up hours later, wrists bound, the ladder pulled up and locked. For the first week, she came up twice a day with water and minimal food crackers, protein bars. She'd sit at the edge of the ladder opening and talk to him calmly, reasonably. All he had to do was sign the papers. Then, this would all be over. Connor refused. So she started coming only once a day, then once every 2 days. The food stopped entirely. Just water, barely enough to keep him alive. She was waiting for me to break, Connor told me, his voice hollow. She said everyone has a breaking point. She was going to find mine. When I called and she answered Connor's phone, she told me he was busy with work. She'd been updating his social media, sending emails from his account, maintaining the illusion that everything was normal. She'd even gone to his office and told them he was taking personal time to deal with a family emergency. The police found evidence that she'd been planning this for months, searches on her computer about life insurance payouts, inheritance law, how long a person could survive without food. She'd been meticulous, calculated. On the 5th day of Connor's hospitalization, Detective Harding called me. We found her. She was attempting to board a flight to Brazil from Mexico City. No extradition treaty. She's being held there while we work on bringing her back. 2 weeks later, Sophia was extradited to Canada. I sat in the courtroom during her bail hearing, watching this woman I'd thought I knew. She looked different, harder somehow. Her eyes were cold as they swept across the room. When they landed on me, she didn't look away. She stared, and in that stare, I saw no remorse, only calculation. Bail was denied. The charges were extensive: attempted murder, forcible confinement, assault, fraud. The Crown Attorney told us they were confident about a conviction. Connor was released from the hospital after 3 weeks. He'd gained back some weight, though he still looked fragile. The physical wounds were healing. The emotional ones would take much longer. He moved in with me. Said he couldn't bear to be alone, couldn't face going back to that house. We sold it immediately. Neither of us could stand the thought of keeping it. The money went into a trust for Connor, managed by a third party. He didn't want to touch it. The trial happened 8 months later. I sat behind Connor every single day, watching him testify, watching Sophia's defense attorney try to tear apart his story. They claimed Connor had been having a breakdown, that he'd locked himself in the attic during a mental health crisis, that Sophia had been trying to help him. But the evidence was overwhelming. The documents she drafted, the searches on her computer, the testimony from Connor's colleagues that Sophia had been the one to tell them he was taking time off, all of it painted a clear picture. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 months later. The judge was stern, her voice cutting through the silent courtroom. Mrs. Patterson, you systematically attempted to murder your husband for financial gain. You held him captive, starved him, and would have let him die had his mother not intervened. You showed no remorse during this trial. I'm sentencing you to 22 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Sophia's face remained blank as they led her away in handcuffs. She didn't look at Connor. She didn't look at anyone. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Connor broke down. I held him as he sobbed, this man who was my little boy, who'd survived something no one should ever have to survive. It's over, I whispered. It's finally over. But trauma doesn't end with a verdict. Connor started therapy intensive sessions 3 times a week. He had nightmares, panic attacks. Some days he couldn't leave the house. The sound of a door locking would send him into a spiral. Slowly, painfully, he began to heal. It's been 2 years since that terrible day I found him in the attic. Connor has his own apartment now, a modest 1-bedroom in Burlington, close to me. He's back at work, though he took a step back from his partnership, choosing less responsibility and more balance. He started dating again carefully, slowly. He tells me about the woman he's seeing, Sarah, and how patient she is with him, how she understands when he needs space. We have dinner together twice a week, Connor and I. We don't talk about Sophia unless he brings her up, which isn't often. We talk about work, about books, about the garden I'm planning for spring, normal things, healing things. Last week, Connor told me something that made me cry. Mom, I need you to know you saved my life. Not just physically. You saved me from giving up. When I was up there in that attic, in those final days, I kept thinking about you. I knew you'd come. I knew you wouldn't stop until you found me. That's what kept me alive. I think about that often now. How close I came to talking myself out of using that spare key. How I almost convinced myself I was overreacting, being an overbearing mother. How I nearly turned around and drove home. But I listened to my instincts. I listened to that voice inside that said something was wrong. There are lessons I've learned from this nightmare that I want to share, especially with other parents, other family members, anyone who loves someone. First, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let politeness or fear of seeming intrusive stop you from checking on someone you love. I almost did. I almost let social norms and worry about overstepping keep me from using that key. If I had, Connor would be dead. Second, stay connected. One of Sophia's tactics was isolation, cutting Connor off from his support system gradually, so gradually that none of us noticed until it was too late. If someone in your life starts becoming harder to reach, if their partner makes excuses for why they can't talk, pay attention. Real love doesn't isolate. Real love doesn't build walls between a person and their family. Third, know the signs of financial abuse. Sophia's plan revolved around taking control of Connor's assets. Financial abuse is real, and it's often a precursor to other forms of abuse. If someone pressures their partner to sign over assets, to change beneficiaries, to give up financial independence, those are red flags that shouldn't be ignored. Fourth, believe survivors. When Connor first told me what Sophia had done, part of me struggled to accept it. How could the woman who'd seemed so perfect be capable of such evil? But people aren't always what they appear to be. When someone tells you they've been abused, believe them, support them. Don't make them prove their trauma. Finally, healing isn't linear. Connor has good days and bad days. Some weeks, he's fine, laughing and making plans. Other weeks, he can barely get out of bed. That's okay. Trauma doesn't have a timeline. Recovery doesn't follow a schedule. The best thing I can do is be there, consistently, without judgment, for however long it takes. I look at Connor now, and I see a survivor. I see someone who endured the unthinkable and came out the other side. He's not the same person he was before, how could he be? But he's here. He's alive. He's fighting every day to reclaim his life. And I'm so incredibly proud of him. To anyone reading this, anyone who's worried about a loved one, anyone who's hesitating to reach out or check in, don't wait. Make the call. Send the message. Show up at their door. Trust yourself. Because sometimes that instinct, that nagging feeling that something's wrong, is the only thing standing between someone you love and tragedy. I used a spare key. It seemed like such a small thing at the time, such a violation of privacy, but that key saved my son's life. Don't ignore your instincts. Don't wait for permission to care. Don't let fear of being wrong stop you from potentially being right. Because the cost of doing nothing might be something you can never take back.